is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and thank you for joining us on Global Business live from Nairobi. I am Peninah Karibe. As always, let's begin with a look at the markets. The JSE started the new week on a positive note, snapping back from a three-session losing streak. Local issues, including a report released at the weekend regarding expropriation without compensation, as well as a victory by Public Enterprises Minister against the Public Protector in court, were largely side issues today. And tepid local growth and the prospect of South Africa facing further credit ratings downgrades continues to weigh upon local markets, with Bloomberg reporting that foreigners had offloaded 68.3 billion rand, that's just about $4.8 billion of South African equities and debt so far in 2019. And by the way, that's the most for JSE records dating back to 1998. Coming up on the show tonight, South Africa's company, South Africa's emission standards threaten Sasol plants in the country. China and the US gear up for another round of trade talks in Shanghai. And Nigerians cash in on waste recycling while keeping the environment clean. All right, let's start off in South Africa, where energy giant Sasol has disclosed that some of its plants in the country are under threat. The company says this is due to its need to comply with the stricter sulfur dioxide emission standards. Sasol currently operates plants that convert coal into motor fuel and chemicals. By 2025, it will have to observe South Africa's new emission limits for coal boilers of 500 milligrams per normal cubic meter. But the firm, which is South Africa's biggest by revenue, says the flue gas desulfurization equipment needed to cut emissions of the gas is too costly and technically difficult to install. Let's get more details now from Angelo Coppola, who's live for us in Johannesburg. So Angelo, looking at the cost on the environment and people's health, does Sasol have a good case to have the deadline pushed forward?
Short answer there, Peninah, is absolutely not, and that's according to the environmentalists that we've been speaking to over the last couple of weeks. Sasol has been battling with the Department of Environmental Affairs, now known as the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, going back to 2010. That's when the Air Quality Act was amended for the first time. In 2014, the fight continued, and eventually that minimum emission standard was introduced, put in place, and still Sasol continued fighting it. So the DEA, or the Environmental Affairs Department, tried to then, just recently in fact, double the minimum emission standards for sulfur dioxide, that's SO2. That was successfully challenged in a court of law, and the Environmental Affairs Department then had to go back to the drawing board and involve the public in those decisions to adjust those emission standards. So the two are linked. The fact that Sasol was fighting to have that level dropped significantly, or in fact raised significantly, and the fact that the Environmental Affairs Department tried to increase that SO2 emission level. So what we have right now is the science showing that the doubling of those emission standards or levels would have a deadly consequence for high-felt communities. That's where most of the Sasol operations are, and in fact some of the Eskom operations are, because both of those two companies are under fire at the moment. That fight continues, and Sasol's attempts to claim unaffordability are falling on deaf ears as far as the NGOs and environmentalists are concerned. Peninah?
Okay, so Angelo, give us an idea of the magnitude of the pollution by some of Sasol's plants.
Well, look, the key plants, and those are the ones in Sasolburg and in Secunda, are a major contributor to the high population or pollution levels in the so-called high-felt priority area. The limit, as you mentioned earlier, for SO2, which is sulfur dioxide emissions, for their coal boilers, and they've got some 15 of them at those two plants, is 500 milligrams of the pollutant per normal cubic meter. In its own report, Sasol are reporting that their 2018 emission levels show some of the equipment in Secunda and in Sasolburg are regularly exceeding 1,000 milligrams. That's double the allowable limit, and if there's any evidence of harm being done, that's one part of it. The other part of it really is the fact that Just to the east rand of Johannesburg, we see the highest concentration of ear, nose and throat specialists in the country and probably on the continent, just to show what impact those pollution levels are having on the populations in that area. Peninah?
So, Angelo, has the government considered any incentives or tax rebates to ease the burden of installing equipment to cut emissions in the companies involved?
Well, Peninah, very simply here, I needed a quick reality check, and I was reminded by the environmentalists that Sasol and Eskom have had 15 years to get their act together in terms of complying with those environmental standards and minimum emission standards. They have applied and received compliance postponements regularly from the Department of Environmental Affairs, almost automatically, some would say. So the environmentalists are saying that incentives and rebates aren't really needed. The companies now need to act and they need to comply, and that's despite that hefty price tag of what Eskom estimates around R1 billion to introduce that technology into their plants. A lot of the environmentalists are saying that that figure is a little over-exaggerated for impact, but the bottom line is that at this stage they actually have to come to the party. They don't need incentives and they don't need any rebates. Peninah?
Wow, that's tough, Angelo. And 15 years, I mean, that's a long time. So we do know that Sasol is South Africa's biggest company by revenue. But if indeed these emission standards would result to the closure of some of its plants, then what would that mean for the country's economy?
Well, look, I mean, the consequences of any kind of closure would obviously have an impact an already dangerous situation in the country. Employment levels are a key factor here. We have amongst the highest unemployment levels in the world, in fact. But the staff employed at these plants aren't low-level mining entry staff. These are fairly mid-level and senior-level people who will probably get retrenched or asked to leave or take packages. So they won't find employment elsewhere very easily. So we're not talking huge job losses there, but we are talking high net worth individuals in many instances. If any of the coal mines close that supply coal to those boilers that Sasol uses, that's going to be a different issue there. There will be higher staff numbers that will go into those employment numbers, which isn't good for the company. In fact, you'll remember that South Africa is muddling along at just over 1% in terms of economic growth. And in fact, last week, the IMF downgraded South Africa's growth for this year to 0.7% and only 1.1% next year. So it's already at a precarious level. So whether or not Sasol does close one or two of those plants will have an impact. It'll be more of a confidence issue than anything else. And unfortunately, there will be people who will be unemployed. But the economy is already muddling along, and it's not going to make a huge amount of difference at the end of the day. Peninah?
All right, Angelo, always great talking to you. Thank you very much. Angelo Coppola live in Johannesburg. Now, Zimbabwe's government workers say they are being squeezed by inflation. Running at an annual rate of 175%, the country's struggling economy is now forcing some to live in their places of work just to cut down on the cost of rent and transportation. Here's CGTN's Farai Mokutuya with the details.
The unrelenting price hikes have seen more Blessing Nyambara's standard of living decline rapidly and forced drastic changes.
I have cut down my meals to one per day. I can only eat when I'm back from work. I just go in the morning. I spend the whole day at work, and then when I'm home, that's when we can organize a meal so that we can eat, all of us, when we are home. We can no longer afford a situation whereby anyone can eat anything anytime he or she feels like at home. But as a family, we have to wait for each other, and then we eat together so that we won't waste any food anymore.
The high school mathematics teacher takes home 321 Zimbabwe dollars after deductions, well below the $1,200 basic consumer food basket, and not enough to attend to urgent obligations.
With that 321, it's totally difficult. I couldn't place anything because now I have my mother who is sick. So I needed to buy some painkillers. I only bought painkillers for her, and it was finished. I can't take her to the hospital. I only bought painkillers. But I have to take her to the hospital. She has to be diagnosed. Maybe she has cancer or something. But because we can't, it will grow and we'll lose it. So I think if my government do something now, and it has to be now.
President Mnangagwa has acknowledged the current hardships and says the painful austerity measures will begin to ease by the end of this year. In the interim, his government has offered civil servants allowances and an increment to cushion them. However, the workers say what's currently on the table won't take them very far. Unions representing them want October 2018 salaries reinstated.
I think they have to give us the money equivalent to our $500 they used to give us. And with that, we can survive. If they use the interbank rate, we are okay.
More Blessing is one of the more fortunate ones, able to supplement her income with poultry and gardening projects. But with the economic crunch affecting everyone, her client base is shrinking, and that will make it harder for her to stay afloat. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
A look at your corporate news now. Heineken has missed estimates for first half profits as higher packaging costs offset increased beer sales. The firm says input costs in the January to June period rose 8.5%, principally for aluminium used in packaging. Its emerging market operations were also hit by having to pay hard currency for raw and packaging material with weaker currencies such as the Brazilian real. Jumia Technology is planning to boost the expansion of its online retail and trading platform in less developed parts of Africa through an agreement with London-listed energy firm Vivo. Under the deal, the firm will use Vivo Energy's over 2,100 Shell and Engine branded service stations across the continent as pickup points for Jumia bought goods. The partnership will initially be rolled out in Kenya, Morocco, Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire. United Arab Emirates gas firm Dana is selling off its Egyptian assets worth over $500 million. Sources say the Abu Dhabi-listed energy producer, whose main assets are in Egypt and in Kurdistan region of Iraq, is looking to shift its focus to its Kurdistan operations. The gas producer started marketing its Egyptian assets over the past few weeks, and while it has received interest from the market there are no buyers lined up yet. And Irish low-cost airline Ryanair has warned that additional delays to the return of the Boeing 737 MAX to service could leave it without any of the jets next summer. The airline says it has cut the number of 737 MAX jets it plans to fly next summer from 58 to 30, cutting its growth rate for the year from 10 million to 5 million passengers. And that's a look at your corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business. Coming up. The African Development Bank urges governments to boost industrial capacity to benefit from the free trade zone. And South Sudan plans to import electricity from Uganda as well as Ethiopia.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sumitra Naidu. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The African Development Bank is urging African nations to boost the output of goods and services and integrate payment systems if they are to take advantage of the new $3.4 trillion free trade area. President Akinwumi Adesina has urged governments to mobilize more domestic resources and encourage sovereign wealth and pension funds. His remarks come after a 55-nation continental free trade zone was launched in Niger earlier this month. The agreement aims to unlock Africa's economic potential by boosting intra-regional trade, strengthening supply chains and spreading expertise.
Africa cannot be a market where others simply import and put stuff in. Africa has to have its own industrial capacity to be able to take advantage of a $3.3 trillion market with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So Africa has to industrialize. Industrialization is critical. It's not just about moving raw materials, it's value-added products.
South Sudan has reached an agreement with neighboring Uganda and Ethiopia to import electricity. The first phase of the deal will see power imported to the oil producers' border areas. This comes as South Sudan attempts to enhance economic recovery in areas greatly affected by the civil war. With the details, here's CGTN's Patrick Oyet.
South Sudan's government is in the process of installing 100 megawatts of power equipment in Juba. The country's electricity ministry says it has agreements with Uganda and Ethiopia to connect South Sudan's towns close to the two countries.
I think it's a great option. Certain countries around the world, they import electricity. And for a new country like South Sudan coming out of a conflict, it's a good step. Because when these towns have reliable electricity, their economy can begin to grow. And when their economy begins to grow, they can attract international investment for large-scale projects.
Many residents in Juba say they welcome the move.
We are using solar system, we are using generator, which is not reliable. Getting fuel is a problem, but if we have electricity in place, which is reliable for us to run our business, and then I think that is a good move.
What the government has planned right now, it's really very good. It's going to help. It's of a serious advantage, because currently when you look at the whole city, it's all running on generators only.
Juba says the move will allow economic recovery of areas affected by the civil war.
South Sudan's government also says it's looking for investors to fund 5 major hydropower projects across the country. But until peace in the country is fully established, securing investment will be a challenge. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
In Tunisia, Chinese experts were in the south of the country to provide technical support in setting up a grid-scale solar power plant. Tunisia has enormous untapped solar power potential and aims to develop at least 835 megawatts of solar power plants by 2030. With the details, here's CGTN's Adner Shawashi.
A memorandum of understanding was signed between Tunisian authorities and Chinese companies specialized in renewable energy, with a view to making the most of their expertise in matters of solar energy.
Strengthening cooperation with Chinese enterprises is one of the objectives of Tunisian ministries and companies. There are many opportunities in the renewable energy sector. It is a win-win partnership between Tunisia and China.
Experts in renewable energies noted that China is a renewable energy superpower and that Tunisia can benefit from Chinese expertise in this domain.
Solar energy is available in Tunisia. Photovoltaic panels can be used to produce megawatts of electricity. Chinese companies have full mastery of the technology and the produced energy.
Many Tunisian companies are specialized in the distribution of photovoltaic solar panels. Professionals import their equipment and products from China.
We're importing our products from China. The Chinese market is very competitive in terms of quality, technology, and price.
The Minister of Energy stressed that the development of renewable energy code aims to create a regulatory body for the electricity and gas sectors to oversee the coexistence of private renewable energy developers, independent electricity producers, and self-producers.
Tunisia's Economic Cities Fax is hosting regional symposium on the solar photovoltaic energy sector. Over 60 institutions and companies operating in the field of renewable energies will discuss ways of strengthening cooperation with local and international partners, especially Chinese companies. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Uganda is amending a new law that's set to boost the quality and output for its main commodity export, coffee. The latest legislation will replace the current form that only covers post-farm activities. It will widen governance to planting materials, harvest and post-harvest handling, as well as research and climate change. CGTN's Hilary Ayosiga reports.
Robert Walakira is a coffee farmer in central Uganda. He's worried that proposed law changes could push him out of business.
Small-scale farmers like me may fail to register because of the tough guidelines.
The government wants to compel farmers like Robert to register so they can easily monitor the coffee value chain. Some of the amendments in the law say the type of soil and acreage must be assessed before setting up a coffee garden. Walakira has been growing coffee for the last 20 years, but he's worried that the bill in its current form will exclude many small-scale farmers. He now wants it reviewed to accommodate farmers with fewer coffee trees. The government says it's moving to promote the quality of its topmost agriculture export. Tough sanctions are also proposed.
If they find out that you're already growing coffee at a certain acreage, without the support of government or without being registered, you are supposed to pay a fine of 960,000 or be imprisoned 2 years, or both.
Coffee is Uganda's single largest agricultural export. The country plans to increase coffee production from 4 million bags to over 20 million bags by 2025. And to hit this target, the government wants strict guidelines set at on and off-farm level. But farmers like Walakira say they should be consulted as the sector is reformed. Hilary Isga, CGTN, Kampala.
The recently announced deal by food and beverages giant PepsiCo to acquire Pioneer Foods for $1.7 billion is expected to be a massive boost for South Africa's economy. This is despite the political and social economic risks facing the country. PepsiCo is also paying a premium of 56% over the weighted average share price prior to the transaction being announced.
Generally, if you're looking at international transactions, if you put yourselves in the investor's shoes, you're going to be looking at a much longer term view. So why do people invest? They invest for growth. So, having not had direct conversations, generally we see a premium being paid because, a PepsiCo is taking a 10, 15-year view versus a local investor that is going to be, potentially taking a 3 to 5 year. So they're prepared to wait a lot longer to get the initial investment back versus, if they're going to be paying book value. But I think also there's clearly some really attractive synergistic opportunities for them. So generally, we would look at that premium in isolation, but if I can, use that synergy to grow other parts of my business more aggressively because of a Pioneer's infrastructure or customers or whatever it may be, that payback period may come back quite aggressively.
to Ghana now, where car dealers say the introduction of tax on vehicles with engine capacity of 3 litres or more is taking a toll on their businesses. The government introduced what it describes as a luxury vehicle tax in August last year to raise more revenue to support its budget. But a year later, car dealers want the government to scrap that tax. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Same likewise this one.
Khalifa Zakari wants to buy a new car, but he says he's decided not to purchase one with a large engine.
I wanted to buy a car here, and I've seen the one I want, but due to the price and at the same time the engine capacity, I think I can't afford it. Yeah, I can't afford it to the extent that even if I buy it, the taxes imposed on the bigger engine cars, it will affect me.
Car dealers say business has been slow since the government introduced a tax on vehicles with engine capacity of 3.0 litres and above last year. Owners of such vehicles and new buyers are expected to pay an annual tax of between $185 and $370.
It have almost destroyed our businesses because nobody wants to buy a car and pay so much on just roadworthy. So it doesn't help us with the business people.
The government predicted it will raise $90 million a year from the luxury vehicle tax. However, it says so far only $3 million has been raised. Car dealers say that's because the tax means far fewer luxury vehicles are being bought. The government says it aims to raise more revenue from the tax on luxury vehicles. It also wants to control emissions and reduce the impact on climate change. According to Ghana's Ministry of Environment, the transport sector has the fastest growth rate of greenhouse emissions at about 2.5% per year in Ghana, and the government says its drive to control emissions is being helped by the tax on big engines. However, some economists say the government must review the tax as it has affected many car dealers.
Taxes should not only be aimed at generating revenue, they have to be fair. And they have to ensure that the economy is not distorted.
Car dealers hope to see the tax on luxury vehicles scrapped as the government prepares to deliver its mid-year budget review. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
You're watching Global Business. Coming up after the break. China and the US gear up for another round of trade talks in Shanghai. And some eastern parts of Australia could soon run out of water.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
For look at some economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Right, let's have a look at the top stories of the day. Controversial leader of the Islamic movement of Nigeria, Ibrahim Zakzaki, is set to find out next week if he will be released from government custody. El Zakzaki and his wife have been held since December 2015 on charges of homicide, unlawful assembly, and disturbance of public peace. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has met the deputy head of Sudan's ruling Transitional Military Council in Cairo. General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalou's meeting with Sisi comes one day before talks are set to resume between the TMC and Sudan opposition leaders. And an Italian Coast Guard vessel stranded in the Mediterranean with at least 130 migrants aboard has been allowed to dock in the Sicilian port of Augusta. The migrants, who had set off from Libya in two rickety boats, were picked up by Italian patrols on Thursday night and transferred to the Coast Guard ship Bruno Gregorotti. And that's a look at some of the day's top stories. Top negotiators from China and the United States will meet in Shanghai on Tuesday and Wednesday for continued talks. This will be the first time they are meeting since President Xi Jinping and his counterpart from the US, Donald Trump, agreed in June to resume economic and trade consultations. Experts say both sides are working to ensure a new round of productive talks. CGTN's Huna explains.
The meeting scheduled this week will be the first face-to-face discussions between the two sides since their top leaders met at the G20 summit in Japan last month. Analysts said that holding the talks in Shanghai, the country's financial hub, will enable the U.S. to better understand China's determination to open up further. Previously, the trade talks in China took place in Beijing.
The recent Chinese purchase of U.S. agricultural products sends a positive signal and paves the way for trade talks in Shanghai.
According to China's Development and Reform Commission and the Ministry of Commerce on Sunday, several million tons of soybeans have already been loaded and will soon be on their way to China. Meanwhile, the U.S. has already exempted extra duties on 110 items of industrial products from China. Earlier this month, some Chinese enterprises have consulted with U.S. suppliers over the prices of cotton, pork, and sorghum. Agreements have been reached on some products and also on the exemptions of extra duties on U.S. imports.
There is huge demand in Chinese agricultural products market. Our import is growing year by year. The U.S. side can only benefit by cooperating with China.
Experts say that Chinese enterprises will continue to purchase U.S. agricultural products in accordance with its needs. And sources from both ministries said the new deals on imports of U.S. agricultural products will be reached as long as prices are reasonable and the products of good quality. China hopes that the U.S. can come up with more concrete measures to ensure a good atmosphere and positive outcome for the trade talks. Hona, CGTN, Beijing.
Meanwhile, the U.S. recently issued a memo urging the World Trade Organization to change its rules and end unfair benefits for some developing countries, including China. U.S. President Donald Trump also directed the U.S. Trade Representative to not support those countries' memberships in the OECD. A spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry says any benefits decision belongs to the WTO, not Washington. Let's take a listen.
WTO's special and differential treatment shows its core value and fundamental principles, which means it's up to the majority of its members to decide who's entitled to enjoy the treatment. It is not for the U.S. to decide who's the developing country. The U.S. demands on the WTO further exposed its wayward arrogance and selfishness. China will continue to contribute a fair share in the trade talks that is fit for its own capacity and current development stage, and will also help other developing countries to achieve real trade fairness and common progress.
Foreign ministers from Southeast and East Asian nations are gathering in Bangkok, where the ongoing China-US trade war is expected to be the top concern. CGTN's Martin Liu gives us a preview.
Many people attending the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting here in Bangkok will be looking forward to hearing what the Chinese representative Wang Yi has to say about the ongoing US-China trade war. The Chinese President Xi Jinping and the US leader Donald Trump discussed the issue at a G20 meeting in Japan in June. Delegates here will be very much hoping for an update on those talks from Mr. Wang. Now, Mr. Wang is here because China is a full dialogue partner of the 10-member ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. He'll be attending a number of meetings during the coming week. Now, from the American side, their most senior diplomat, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, will also be here. At the moment, there is no direct face-to-face meeting scheduled between Mr. Wang and Mr. Pompeo. Now, ASEAN has expressed a great concern about the trade war because a number of ASEAN countries are suppliers to China and they've seen their exports fall dramatically as Chinese trade with America has reduced. This is something that was discussed in great detail when ASEAN had a meeting of full leaders here in Bangkok, also in June. Now, many within ASEAN are contrasting China's Belt and Road Initiative, which seeks to open up and broaden world trade with what they see as protectionism from Mr. Trump, his policy of America first, and restrictive trade tariffs that have been imposed. One commentator on international affairs based here in Bangkok that I spoke to said he described the situation as liberalism versus protectionism. Now, also on the agenda will be efforts to create lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. A senior official from the DPRK, though we think not in fact the foreign minister, will be here as ASEAN discusses moves to normalize relations between the DPRK and South Korea, and also to rehabilitate the DPRK back into world affairs. There's even been talk of the DPRK leader Kim Jong-un attending an ASEAN South Korea summit towards the end of the year in November. Now, the DPRK and South Korea have been divided since the end of World War II, with both sides claiming to be the sole legitimate government for the entire country.
China's launch of the new stock market last week has ignited investors' enthusiasm for exchange-traded funds. Several funds offering new stocks on the board have seen healthy sales increase. Chen Tong has more from Shanghai.
Several funds allocated shares in the stock market are seeing major rises. The ETF run by Southern Asset Management saw a boost in holdings of almost 50% on the day of the stock's debut. And other similar products also received big purchases during the day. Much of the enthusiasm for the exchange-traded funds stems from stock's high threshold for investors, which means the ETFs are an effective investment method for both individual and institutional investors, otherwise not qualified to bid for the new high-tech stocks.
Investors' willingness to invest in the stock market stems from their desire for valuable and sustainable shares. But the investment threshold of the stock market is quite high, which means not everyone is able to invest in the new board. So they use ETF products to get access to high yields over the middle and long term.
Assets under management of China's outstanding exchange-traded funds hit a record high last year, according to research company Oliver Wyman. The company says ETFs are gaining popularity more than 480% in 2018. One of the reasons, of course, is the large potential growth of the middle and small-sized firms, which the Chinex ETF tracks, while at the same time, ETFs offer an easy and convenient way to invest.
Yeah, in the last year, we see a lot of participation in China Next ETF. So one of the reasons is that it's a very efficient tool for Chinese investors to get exposure, get investment into the tech market, which is normally the China Next market is less liquid, less easy for investors to invest. So it becomes a very efficient tool for investors to invest in.
Experts also expect more ETF products tracking the new stock market to be released in the coming months, especially after the launch of the stock market index by the Shanghai Stock Exchange and the China Securities Index. Chen Hong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Let's now turn to the world of tech. Shanghai is scheduled to sharpen the focus and expand the scope of the Second World Artificial Intelligence Conference. This is as the city gears up to run the National Center for the Thriving Technology late next month. ACGTN's Zhang Xishuan with more.
This robot, which looks similar to Wall-E from the sci-fi film produced by Disney in 2008, is a security guard at the Zhangjiang AI Zone in Pudong. It uses facial recognition technology and sends out warnings of abnormal conditions when on patrol. AI is also used in irrigation. The system automatically decides when to water the grass based on the moisture level in the soil. Another machine is used to collect river samples and analyze the water quality. AI is even used in trash bins to automatically sort rubbish. These systems and sensors collect all the data to help supervisors better understand conditions in the whole area without stepping out of the office.
AI technology helps us better manage Zhangjiang Science City. I think it's a great trial in the application of AI.
Meanwhile, Shanghai Shixi High School has established an AI laboratory to go along with new courses for students. The school is now taking advantage of an online teaching platform based on the technology. The new system can create a personalized study plan for students by analyzing their habits. Lin Qing, the vice principal, says students may be divided into classes based on their real-time performance.
By using AI technology, we can understand a student's current learning ability. Then we can place them in classes best suited to their needs.
Shanghai is now home to more than 1,000 core AI companies and 2 AI zones. Giants like Microsoft, Amazon, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent have all set up facilities in the city. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Sydney has now joined the list of cities and towns in Australia that are now under water restrictions. A dozen areas in the country are also faced with the very real threat of running out of water. This is as Australia continues to cope with one of its worst droughts in decades. CGTN's Greg Navarro explains.
Even during a picturesque sunrise, the impacts from the lack of rain are visible. The brown earth and empty, parched paddocks where crops once grew now dominate the landscape across much of rural New South Wales. For 35-year-old Andrew Freeth, those impacts are inescapable.
This is the worst drought that this area has seen in my father's lifetime, in my lifetime.
That means making sure the grain stored in these silos to hand feed his sheep lasts, and planting a season without planting crops.
We're now moving into our 3rd year, so we're really having to widen back spending and be very careful on any future decisions we now make. And we're really just trying to hold on now until the season turns around.
About 95% of New South Wales is experiencing the kind of drought few people have witnessed. 10 drought-ravaged areas are in serious danger of running out of drinking water.
It's estimated some of the hardest hit areas will require truckloads of water just to survive. Up to 1,400 truckloads along roads like this in a single month, in some cases costing up to $1.5 million.
The economic impact from the lack of water is flowing through communities, including the city of Dubbo. Charities that run retail stores here and offer assistance are seeing an increase in the number of people who need help.
Retail's hurting as well because people obviously don't have spare cash to be able to spend. That also flows on to other industries such as hairdressers, where people may have got a haircut every 4 to 6 weeks. Now they're getting one every 2 to 3 months. We've got mums now cutting kids' hairs at home.
For now, there is little relief in the forecast as the drought threatens to extend into another hot, dry summer.
Probably the biggest challenge, as much as the dry landscape or the hungry sheep or the lack of crops to harvest, is staying mentally strong.
While figuring out how much more to cut back until those options, like so many rivers here, run dry. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Kalai.
A handful of prominent vegan influencers have recently been found to be eating animal products. The reaction has been swift and harsh, even though several of the vegans say they had to change their diets for health reasons. From New York, here's Peninah Karibe.
Vegan social media star Yovana Mendoza, known as Ravana, was caught with a plate of fish in this video. It didn't go down well in the vegan community. She cares only for the money and advertising, said one person on YouTube. Fake influencer making money off people, said another.
So the biggest problem here is not that she's eating something that doesn't fit in with their dietary restrictions, but that she's lying about what she is eating.
Mendoza is just one of several vegan influencers who recently admitted to eating animal products for health reasons. Finnish blogger Virpi Mikkonen said early onset of menopause forced her to incorporate meat in her diet. Actress Anne Hathaway, a former vegan, now also eats fish.
Vegan diets absolutely can be healthy, but they can also be really unhealthy.
Champion says vegans should take vitamin B12 supplements and have a diversified protein diet.
So you've got to be thinking about making sure you're getting plenty of beans and lentils and whole grains, even seeds, nuts, that kind of thing, to make sure you're meeting your protein needs.
Mendoza responded to the scandal with a 33-minute video.
I know that so many of you trust me, you listen to me, and you probably feel deceived and lied to.
Svat thinks Mendoza, with 1.2 million followers on Instagram, can reinvent herself, but she might not want to call herself Ravana anymore.
So I do think that there is an opportunity for her to transition, perhaps into wellness or healthy living, but she has to be honest. I think that's the bottom line here.
The global vegan food market is expected to hit around $24 billion by the year 2026. At this point, it is unclear whether some of the recent revelations among some of the leaders of the vegan movement will cause some, if any, to shy away from a plant-based diet. Karina Huber, CGTN, New York.
And looking at the commodities market, gold was little changed today as caution set in ahead of this week's U.S. Federal Reserve meeting, with investors likely to look beyond an expected rate cut to the central bank's guidance on monetary policy for the rest of the year. And analysts say gold's movement will depend on how dovish or how far ajar Jerome Powell leaves the door on the rate cuts in the months ahead. Still here on Global Business. Nigerians are cashing in on waste recycling while keeping the environment clean. And we try out a South African crowd farming app that lets you invest in livestock.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys. The greatest sights. The greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
to bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
With a population exceeding 180 million, Nigeria is one of the largest producers of solid waste in Africa, generating more than 32 million tons annually. To fix this, some Nigerians are now challenging this narrative by using recycling as a means of survival. They are cashing in by exchanging trash for money, as CGTN's Deji Badmas now explains.
It has the look of a massive dump site, but far from it. It's more or less an organized junkyard. From plastic waste to whatever used household items you could think of, you would find them here. And serious buying and selling take place here as well. For many, this is a serious business. Virtually all the waste items here are recycled right at the yard and then resold. No one typifies what goes on here than Bashir, who buys aluminium waste and recycles them into cookware and local stoves and then resells them. The father of one has been doing this for the past 20 years and has been his major source of livelihood.
Out of what I make here, I also feed others. I have trained many people, both old and young, ever since I came from Kaduna to Jabi in Abuja. This work has really helped me. So far, I have been able to marry and have a child. We don't lack for anything. I have peace of mind and I take care of my household. We thank God.
Also earning from this is Mustafa Omar. He's currently a student, and this is where the funding for his education comes from. He says he's been into the recycling business since 2010 and has no plans of stopping anytime soon.
I was in high school when I started this job. From the money I made here, I was able to pay my fees through secondary school and higher education. When I finished with my education, I came back here to continue the business. I've been unable to provide for my parents and siblings and the least privileged. I've even trained others in the business, and they're also working on training others as well.
In a country where unemployment is put at around 23%, jobs like these have become lifesavers, engaging hundreds both directly and indirectly. Isa Adamu comes here almost every day to buy cookware from the recyclers, which he then sells at various local markets in town.
I started this business since from my primary level, so now I have a national diploma for this business where I do. Now I have certificate for national diploma, so I'm not to say anything, even I thank God for this business.
Almost everyone who works here has a unique story to tell. But most importantly is that this has become a vital source of livelihood for them. And of course for them, what they are doing is beyond just recycling. They are converting waste to wealth and raising families from their enterprise. Deji Badmo, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
African innovation is becoming something of a buzzword on the international startup scene. Its increasing entrepreneurial spirit has produced solutions to challenges faced by many countries across the continent. Joining the league now is one South African crowd farming app that allows people to invest in livestock. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi has the story.
Cattle have long been considered a measure of wealth across Africa, but it is not just farmers who are now cashing in. Through this pioneering South African platform, investors eager to benefit from the rising global demand of beef are now able to buy into livestock directly.
We started off on this farm 4 years ago with just 26 cows. And across the platform now we've got over 2,000 cows that people have invested in. Some people own 26 cows as one person, and others own a fraction of the cow where we group 20 people around one cow. So we're seeing this growth into us being an international company where people can invest from anywhere in the world.
So how does this work? Simple. The MyFarm book allows its users to buy shares in a cow directly from their handsets. In addition to buying shares, its users can also buy their own cows or shares in a pregnant cow or young calf. A pregnant cow costs $1,300 and takes 12 months before the newborn calf can be sold for a return. On the other hand, investing in a calf will likely cost you about $900 and take 6 months for it to grow enough to be sold.
An investor coming into livestock world can invest in an unborn baby of a pregnant cow for 18,000 Rand. And after the baby is born and sold, that process takes 12 months. That person's 18,000 Rand has earned an income of 2,000 Rand. So then he gets 20,000 Rand. So that becomes an 11% per annum return on investment.
The project has taken in around $3.5 million so far.
So the gap that we saw was a very simple one. One of saying the financial system in the whole world, even though it's nice and fancy, a bulk of the African population find it very complicated. So we were like, okay, Africans understand agriculture and cattle or things that grow, and really it was all about creating an asset class where people can invest in real tangible things and make their money from the growth of those tangible things.
Livestock Wealth is not the only South African app which allows you to invest in alternative and unique investments. Last year, financial service providers Fed Group released an app which allows users to generate an income by owning assets in various farming ventures. The choice of assets include blueberry bushes, beehive, where sustainable honey is produced, in urban solar farms that generate electricity. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN.
And a quick look at the currencies. The Kenyan shilling was under pressure today due to end-month dollar demand from the energy and manufacturing sector amid excess liquidity in the local money market. It closed the day at 104.03 to the dollar. And with that, we come to the end of Global Business tonight. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platform. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.